everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I have not spent any time before covering the raid and shooting of Bryan Malinowski, since all the other big names in the gun YouTube world were covering it and got to it much faster than a stay-at-home mom of a toddler could ever hope to. As it is, there are often complaints that I am not a 24-hour news cycle. Unfortunately, being a 24-hour mom does not allow that. But I had to come out on this one because now we have had an investigation, and despite just about everything about the raid being questionable, the shooting has been ruled as justified because the ATF escapes accountability every time. And the justification is one giant circle jerk. But before I get into the absurd circle jerk of so-called justice that the ATF is, at this point well known for, I'd like to tell you about a little service that I recently learned about. And that service is basically a subscribe and save ammo delivery service. Ladies and gentlemen, this is pretty cool. Ammo Squared will deliver your ammo on a set schedule or on demand when you need it, like an Amazon of ammo. It is a budget-friendly way to stock up, and you can spend as much or as little as you want. You just pick your calibers, set your budget, and a shipping trigger, and that is it. They will even store that ammo for you for free until you decide you want it. Say that you are on a really tight budget, you technically don't even have to buy a full box at a time. Say that you only want to dump in $3 a month or $1 a month or whatever it is you can afford, you can do that and set it to ship when you have, say, 10 boxes worth or whatever number you choose. It's like an ammo savings account, perfect for if you need ammo but also need to stick to a small budget. Because Joe Biden's economy. They've already shipped out over 65,000 Freedom Pounds a year for 9 years, which frankly makes me shocked that I've never heard of them until now, but I thought the idea was so brilliant that you should know too. Now, back to the ATF doing ATF things. In the event that you somehow haven't heard of this case, here is the short version. 53-year-old Bryan Malinowski was a big airport executive. He also liked to buy, collect, and sell firearms as a hobby, which is not a crime. He allegedly bought a whopping 150 guns over a 3-year period, which frankly I don't think is that many for a gun enthusiast big shot executive director with 6 figures of disposable income. I mean, I'm guessing that he had 6 figures. It would be weird if he didn't. He sold many firearms from his collection, 6 of which did end up later being used in crimes, and 3 were bought by undercover ATF agents. He did not have an FFL, but also wasn't a criminal gangbanger. He sold the guns at gun shows, which is perfectly legal, or I guess was until Biden's engaged in the business rule. On March 19th, the ATF decided that this was bad news and completely unacceptable, descended on his home at 6 a.m., covered up his Ring doorbell cameras so you know that they were doing everything by the books, knocked on the door, and gave him less than 30 seconds to wake up, get dressed, and get to the door before bursting in with a battering ram. Hello and good morning. Oh, and bonus, none of the agents involved were wearing body cameras, which is not suspicious at all. This was how they decided to execute a search warrant on a man they knew had plenty of guns, but no violent criminal record. A man who they could have approached while he was at work, with less chance of getting shot, and executed the warrant on his home while he wasn't even there to, again, shoot them or get in the way. They could have stopped him on his way to and from work. They could have called his lawyer. There was a plethora of other options available to them. In fact, the warrant allowed them to search the premises from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They could have easily not chosen 6 a.m. and had plenty of time. Not that I think he should have been raided anyway, but you get the idea. Now, Malinowski opened fire on the ATF agents, who shot back, striking him in the head, and he succumbed to his wounds 2 days later. Will Jones, the prosecuting attorney for the 6th Judicial District, has ruled that the shooting was justified under Arkansas law. Jones and the Little Rock Police Department provided a timeline of the raid, which is really enlightening. Less than a minute passed between the ATF starting the raid and shooting Malinowski. You can see from the timeline that agents turned on their sirens and car lights at 6:02 a.m., simultaneously with ATF agents knocking on the door and announcing themselves. They allowed a mere 28 seconds to pass before breaching the door with a battering ram, which frankly would scare the crap out of me and probably make me reach for a gun too. 16 seconds after they burst in, he opened fire, shooting an agent in the foot. The ATF responded instantly, shooting Malinowski. The entire interaction took place over 46 seconds. Jones said in the press release that Arkansas law states a law enforcement officer is justified in using deadly physical force if the officer reasonably believes that the use of force is necessary to defend himself or a third person from the use of deadly force. He cited the fact that the ATF did turn on their sirens and lights and were wearing clothes that identified themselves as ATF agents or police as a reason for it being justified, which I'm sure Malinowski noticed when he was dead asleep and woken up by people bursting into his house in the dark over an hour before sunrise, which occurred at 7:14 that morning. According to Jones, once the first ATF agent was shot at, it gave everyone else full license to use deadly force. Now, admittedly, if I'm in that situation and someone has a gun and is shooting at my coworkers, yes, I absolutely would return fire, and it does comply with Arkansas law around deadly force. But the issue here is why the ATF issued the warrant the way they did, why it was issued in the first place, and why it turned into a full-on home invasion. Especially when these types of raids notoriously go badly. But, I mean, we did learn recently that they only get 2 weeks of training, so that explains a lot. The family's lawyer issued a response saying, a U.S. citizen was given 28 seconds before his home was forcefully invaded by armed government intruders. Bryan Malinowski was killed in front of his wife. This is far from over. Especially as he says this was an investigation into a so-called low-level violation with little risk involved in the search. Law enforcement is supposed to give citizens a reasonable amount of time to come to the door to let them in voluntarily. He says that the 28 seconds was far from a reasonable amount of time to wait before entering the home and says it was a violation of Malinowski's Fourth Amendment rights, and I 100% agree. He also said the state's investigation didn't attempt to make independent judgments about whether ATF violated the law when they broke down Mr. and Mrs. Malinowski's front door, but that question should be a matter of grave concern for the rest of us. But when the State Police Criminal Investigation Division investigated the shooting and sent the case off to Jones, the police director made a chilling statement. We do not have the authority to address methods and tactics used or whether agency protocols and policies were followed. Any administrative oversight of tactics would fall to that agency's, in this case the U.S. Department of Justice, internal review and is not part of the scope of what ASP is authorized to review. Which sounds like maybe even he had some questions about the tactics that were used here. But what it all boils down to in the end is that the ATF flat out used flawed tactics, but the ATF and DOJ would have to investigate themselves to address those flawed tactics, and we know that that is not going to happen. So it won't be addressed, and when boiled down to the simplest pieces, ATF actions forced Malinowski to defend himself, which then forced agents to defend themselves. And yet those same flawed tactics were then used to justify the shooting. And at the end of the day, it is just another piece of evidence to show that the government is nothing but violent thugs. And if you don't want to go full libertarian there, then at least admit that the ATF certainly fits that description. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this video. Again, I'm sorry that I did not cover this sooner, but I thought I would sound like a broken record with everyone else doing it. So here was my little contribution. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are new here. Ring that notification bell so you get notified of new videos as they come out. There is anywhere from 3 to 5 a week, depending on how the little princess is feeling. And as always, thanks for tuning in and happy shooting.